Thank you for joining us this morning. Today we're going to be looking in a hive and checking whether it's queen right. Now, a few weeks back we saw that it had some queen cells but no queen. So the hive was requeening itself by raising a queen cell. Now we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but if you've got any questions about queenless hives, beekeeping, flow hives, chime in, put them in there in the comments below and Trace will read those out. But a lot of honey. Beneath their feet they're standing on their wax capping, which is like the lid on the preserving jar. Every cell is capped off with its wax, showing that the honey is ready to keep for a long time. And that's the time when you want to be harvesting some, especially if there's an abundance around. Making space in the hive will limit the hive from swarming, which is when half of them push out the old queen, take off and find a new place to set up shop. But if you can keep harvesting some honey, that's one of the things that will limit the hive from swarming. Keeps them busy, keeps space down in the brood nest for the queen to keep laying her eggs. So I'm just pulling out a little cap here. We may also harvest this frame we're looking at, and even though I'm not seeing full on the ends, I can really see beneath their feet the capping. And if you have a look at this rear window, it tells a story of the ones we've harvested recently and the ones we haven't. So we'll go ahead, harvest a couple of frames while you think of your questions, then we'll go and show you our new super lifter invention. So all I'm doing is turning the key like that, do it in segments to make it easier to turn, and there we go. Pretty soon we should see the honey coming down this tube and into the jar, which is something I never get sick of watching, because it's just such a beautiful thing to watch honey come out. There it is there, and it needs no further processing. It's not full of gunk. You don't have to sieve it and you don't have to settle it and all of that filtering and stuff we used to have to do conventionally. And the only thing that's got it out of the hive is gravity, so it hasn't touched any machinery, and it is as good as honey gets. So it often gets wins prizes at shows and gets a lot of attention for its clarity, for its floral notes, and there's even been studies to say that honey harvested in this way has higher floral notes than honey harvested with conventional extractors. Okay. So let's pick a frame. Which frame do we want to pick? Maybe this one here. We'll get another one going and see if we get a different type of honey or not. Because that's another amazing thing, is getting different honeys from different frames. And it really simply depends on what the bees were foraging on when they filled up that frame. Okay, so let's just grab that key. I'm going to insert it into the bottom slot at the top here, and instead of doing it all at once, I'll just do it in a few segments. There we go. Easy. So that one was very easy to turn compared to that one, and it really does change depending on the wax and the propolis that the bees coat all of the flow frame parts in. Okay. I'm going to have to taste that just because I love honey. Oh, that's got the wild quince, which is a species here that was flowering earlier on in the season, and it's a very bright floral note, blow your taste buds off flavour. I really like having that one on the shelf. It's not everyone's cup of tea because it's so bright and so floral, but to me I love just having all of the different flavours of the seasons on the shelf and the stories that brings to the table. And often people think, oh, isn't honey just honey? And the experience and the conversations that come out of tasting light honeys, dark honeys, really bright flavoured honeys, malty, burnt toffee flavoured honeys, and you get extremes, ones that are bitter, ones like the Tasmanian leatherwood, which is a very famous kind of flavour. We don't get that around here, but if you go down to Tasmania, that's one that people really do prize. And you get the medicinal honeys too, coming out in kind of jelly-like globules, or there's medicinal species that aren't thixotropic jelly-like as well. Any questions, put it in the comments below. We're going to be opening a hive shortly to have a look and see whether the hive is queenright. And queenright is the term we give to a hive when there's a functioning laying queen and everything's sweet. So, if I'm going to walk away though, I don't think it's much of a problem today, but sometimes the bees are hungry, so good practice is just to cover your jar while you walk away. You can come back to this later and see how our honey harvest is going. It doesn't need us to stand here, but it is fun to sit here with your family and watch. Already I can see this is a lighter one than this one, just by the colour of the tubes. So, taste test. Yeah, that's a very different flavour profile to that one, which is an unexpected, amazing benefit of harvesting honey in this new way with our flow hive. Now, where did I put the other cover? Here it is. And we'll just cover that up just in case the bees do cotton on that there's a whole lot of honey around the back of the hive. We don't want them jumping in the jar and going for a swim. Okay, are there any questions coming in, Trace, while we wander down to the garden bed apiary here, and we will get out the smoker, get out a super lifter and open the hive up and see if that hive is queenright.
Yes, it's just maybe while you're harvesting, we've just got a question saying, is it possible to have wax particles in the harvested honey?
Yes, sometimes, but if you have a look there, it's not something you really need to even bother about. A couple of wax flakes, which are the bits, they join all the cells together. Because we've put space between the moving parts for the bee's knees, they do have a little wax bridge which sometimes can dislodge and end up in your honey. But really, all you need to do is let it float to the top. I never do anything about it, but potentially you could skim off a wax flake or two. But really, that is, you know, prize-winning clarity already, and lots of people win prizes with a blue ribbon at the honey shows simply by filling up a jar out of their flow hive. And I kind of feel bad about that, because other people harvesting conventionally put so much effort into getting the clarity that is naturally here harvesting in this way.
Fantastic. So he's just got a question from John's wondering, like, this, you know, you make it look pretty easy and it's a fabulous way to extract the honey out of the hive, and John's is wanting to get one but just wants to know, is it as easy to maintain as it looks?
Okay, so in Australia we've had a bit of a shift from what was probably the golden days, where a hive could really, you know, like it or not, beekeepers would sometimes go away for years, come back and their hive's full of honey and it's still functioning, right? In Australia, that's just shifted with the arrival of the varroa mite, which is in every other continent, and that does need management. And at the moment we're in what's called the build-up phase, which is where that mite is weakening colonies. The colonies are dying out, usually from the hive beetles coming in and finishing them off. Your bees might go and rob the remaining resources, the honey, and also bring back all of these mites. So this is probably the toughest year in our region for beekeeping because of that reason. Next year, it'll probably be a lot easier, and the following years where we join the rest of the world in what they deem is not much of a big problem, just manage the mites a few times a year. So that is typical to hear from people who are in continents where that mite's been established for a long time. But right now, depending on exactly where you are in Australia, the bees need a hand. So it's a wonderful thing to be a beekeeper, really get into it, learn a lot, and give them a hand, because after all, they're a keystone species in our whole agricultural matrix. We need enough beekeepers to look after enough bees to keep the whole system going. So getting into it, learning lots is fun, and you're also doing a great piece of service to our matrix of life around us, and in particular the system that supports us with our agricultural pursuits. And I'll show you right now what a brood inspection looks like, and what we're doing is looking for a laying queen, and that can happen periodically where a queen dies out for some unknown reason. So if you suspect that the numbers are getting low, you're looking in these side windows here and you're seeing that for some reason it doesn't look like as many bees as before, then you'll do ad hoc inspections where you're opening up the hive and having a look in the brood nest here and making sure you've got the larvae down the cells and brood and everything functioning correctly. And if there's not, then there's things you can do about that by introducing resources so they can raise another queen, or you can buy queens in the mail. So that's the theme of today, but just broadly, we have built-in features to make looking after your hive a bit easier. For instance, we've got the pest management tray down here, where you can slide that out, and that's really useful for managing those varroa mites and those beetles, which are the two things that need managing a lot at the moment in our area here on the east coast of Australia. People are finding actually that some of the treatments like the organic acids like the formic acid can be applied right there in the tray without even having to open up the hive like you used to. So a useful area to do management, and we've got all sorts of other things built into the hive to make beekeeping just a bit easier for you compared to a conventional hive. Come with me and we'll do our brood inspection. Keep the questions coming in.
Right.
So we're going down to the hive on the end down here, which the notes say on the 3rd of this month there were some queen cells but no queen. So a great idea to take notes in your logbook, which comes with this little caddy here, or you can write it on the inner cover under the roof. So we did light this smoker earlier. This hive has been a little grumpy, so when you know your hive's a little more protective of its entrance area, you want to make sure you're putting on your protective gear, making sure the zips are all done up. We've got a central one here. I like the bee jacket and pants, other people like the full suit, but I really do recommend the ventilated, which just makes it a lot cooler when you're doing your beekeeping. Okay, so we're ready there. I'm not going to wear gloves, but if you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves. I always have them handy in case the hive is getting a bit aggressive, to limit the stings on my hands. I don't mind a few stings on my hands, but when you're beginning in beekeeping, just make it easier for yourself by protecting yourself. Okay, so I'm going to blow a bit of smoke directly into the entrance, and then let's get this smoker going a bit more. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to smoke my hands, which just helps mask my mammal scent that the hive might react to. After all, they've evolved with bears and things ripping their hives apart. Okay. That goes there. And now I'm going to show you our super lifter invention, which has made looking after the bees down here a lot easier. So all we need to do is open up our little bag, and we've designed it so with basically we've designed it so it does a lot of the work for you. And how we did that is we made it automatically set itself up when we take our hands apart like that, and we're rolling our wrists in, and that's what it needs to look like when you connect onto your hive. In this case, you're going to connect onto the lower load point screws there, and then we fold up the upper brackets over the top, and we've got all these steps for you. That was step 3, we're on to step 4, which is just lifting this. Now, watch how easy this is to lift. I'm going to lift with just 2 fingers, and I've lifted the really heavy box full of honey off the other one and taken away that tedious work of chiseling with your hive tool. Now you want to make sure that's set up. There's a 3-stage telescopic pole there, and now I'm actually ready to roll over that heavy honey super in a much easier way than muscling it off and chiseling it off like we once did. So there we go there, and now we're already in the brood nest, ready to have a look and see whether we have a functioning laying queen. This is the queen excluder, which is made to stop the queen getting up and laying in your flow frames. Now, that's a common piece of beekeeping equipment that where you don't want the queen laying in your honey collection areas. I've noticed already they're a little bit antsy. They're giving me a bit of a warning, so I'm going to use some more smoke. If you've got a hive that is aggressive, don't be shy with the smoke, because it will help settle them down. At first, it will kind of rile them up a little bit and you hear the note change. Then a minute later, they will be calmer than they were. So, plenty of smoke when you know a hive has a bit of an aggressive temperament. Now in this case, the old queen has vanished for an unknown reason, and what's left is a hive that's raising its own queen. They're a bit thin on numbers, so this is a time where we really need to activate our pest management tray and catch some of those beetles and make sure that the hive doesn't get taken over by the hive beetles, which can happen when a hive's weak. Okay, so I'm going to just look at this excluder, make sure there's not a queen on there. I'll lean it up against the hive just in case we need the
What do you need, seeds? The brackets?
The brackets and the hive tool, if you would. So I might swap your places there, Callum, just so that you can get a really good look at the frames on the sunny side of the hive. And I'll show you how to connect these little inspection frame rests, which is something we brought out recently that works really nicely with the super lifter, and it's a bit more robust than using the shelf brackets, which could also be used as a frame rest. So that goes over there. Now if it's tight you can turn the bracket around, but we've made it adjustable here, where if you've got thicker wood, this pad turns around. Now I can tell the bees, as suspected, are a little bit grumpy. Sometimes they're more grumpy when they haven't got a queen as well. But let's see. Fingers crossed the new queen has a nice, gentle temperament and is good and productive, and also great at keeping all of the chores in the hive going. The genetics of herself and who she mates with, or the drones she mates with, do set the temperament of the hive. So replacing the queen, in this case the hive is replacing the queen itself, hopefully, will then have a whole new set of genetics. Any more questions coming in, Trace?
Yes, Seeds. Look, just a question on the super lifter. We've got a new beekeeper and they've just received their hive in the super lifter. Do you have to have the roof on, Seeds, when you use the super lifter?
You don't. You can take the roof off. We've designed it for either way. We wanted to make sure you can keep the roof on, because some people allow a whole lot of honeycomb to build up in there. We don't really want to have to break that every time we use the lifter. So we designed the system to handle it either way, and that way it just makes it a lot quicker to do your brood inspections. Some of our early prototypes, the feedback was good and made it a lot easier to lift, but it was a bit slower than conventional lifting, and I thought that's not good enough, so let's make it quicker and easier. And that's what we've done, and we get an amazing amount of feedback, really quite touching, of people where it's really changed their lives having this little super lifter contraption they can walk up and easily do their brood inspections with. Okay, so here we go. It's not looking good on this frame. It's just got some honey coming in, which is great to see the resources, but we've got no brood at all. So nothing. So we don't have a queen yet that we can see, so let's keep looking. Could be, if it was queen cells on the 3rd, then it should have been laying for a week or so. Perhaps. It really depends how long she took to mate. So if I take this out, again, I'm not seeing any sign of a queen. There's no larvae, there's no brood, so this hive is in trouble. Without a queen, they will slowly dwindle. Okay, so if you have a look down in this region here, you can see the cells have no brood. And if we keep going, and they are a little bit antsy, I may put my gloves on if I find they are likely to sting me. I'm going through the brood nest here, and these are all naturally drawn combs, meaning that we just provided the wooden frame and a tiny long paddle pop stick in the top to give them a bit of a guide. And no sign. So I need to look carefully now because the queen could have just started laying recently, but I cannot see any eggs down the cells. I cannot see any sign of a queen. Now what do we have there? No sign of a queen. There's pollen down the cells, there's plenty of honey. But the plenty of drones, which are the male bees who really don't do many chores in the hive apparently. Let's put that one there. And if the queen was on that frame, at least she could crawl back into the hive along these frames here. Okay, now let's, we can just keep moving frames across. We don't need to put that many out on our frame rest, but it does give us plenty of space to work the hive. Okay, no sign, no sign. So they had queen cells, but perhaps for some reason they were unsuccessful in raising their own queen. Now, we'll keep looking while we answer some questions.
Oh, Seed, sorry. We've got Bill, who's down on the south coast of New South Wales, so not far from us, has a 6-frame hive, so 8 brood frames. He's just added his super. 7 of the 8 frames were full. Should he have waited till after winter, or do you think it was okay time to be adding that super box?
Well, we're getting a good honey flow now, so it really depends what is going on. But I would say yes, a good time. If the super box is full, you likely get some flows at the end of summer and also at perhaps in autumn. So you've done the right thing. You've waited till your hive is almost full. They're using all of the frames, and you've put the flow hive box on top. It's very warm where we are at the moment, so you're not really inhibiting them by adding the extra space. The times where you wouldn't is where either as you said, there's no forage coming, you're coming up to a winter time, then that would be a time where you don't add the super box because you're just making it harder for them on the cooler nights by having that extra space. It's hard for them to keep the brood nest warm because they need to keep it at about 35, 36 degrees C, just below our body temperature, in order for the babies to survive. So you're juggling all these things as a beekeeper. You're forecasting what the nectar flow might be ahead, and if you want to hand us some local beekeepers, are we likely to get a nectar flow, which is the term we give for when there's a lot of flowers producing nectar. Will you get a nectar flow towards the end of summer or autumn in your area? Most likely you will, where you are, and you may collect a nice box of honey before the season's out. But if you're anything like us here, where we are on the coast, you may even get good nectar flows all winter as well. So we have a year-round beekeeping season, which is great, and does allow us to just leave the hive in this configuration all year round. Other parts of the world like to pack it down to a smaller hive for winter, make sure they've got enough stores to survive. We don't have to worry about any of that. We just make sure we have a laying queen and make sure we are keeping the hive beetles, trapping them. Really important in this area right now because, now, I just got a little sting in the end of my finger. It's quite a sensitive spot. And what I'm going to do is just take that sting out by brushing across it now. Sometimes people react badly to stings, so know your first aid. But that's a little stinger there. And it's got a little venom sac on the back of it, which actually keeps pumping away for a while. So the sooner you give it a little sideways scrape, the better. But now that I've got that sting, it sort of sets off a bit of a scent of that sting. So it's worthwhile giving that a little smoke to hide that smell, which might limit the bees from following suit with more stings. And I'll blow a bit more smoke into the hive. As said, these are a bit grumpy. I'm looking forward to a nice gentle queen in here. So far they don't have one, so we might need to introduce one from another hive. In many areas you can order them in the mail, or otherwise we could find a nice hive and transfer them a frame that had a queen cell on it, or even just eggs down the cells. And they can have another go at raising a new queen. Okay, now most sensible people would put their gloves on about now, but I probably won't till I get another sting. Here we go. You do sort of get used to stings as a beekeeper. Some people though do swell up quite a lot, so you might want to put your gloves on and give yourself a nice easy start in beekeeping. A lot of drones here. Have a look at these ones with the big eyes, see if you can tell the difference between the drones and the workers. Workers, drone, workers, drone, and you see that there's a lot here. Sometimes that can happen when the queen starts, when the workers start laying eggs, but I'm not seeing that either. So simply, there just was a lot of drones in here when the queen died out or vanished. Normally they get together to raise another queen, but not always, and that's where we can intervene as a beekeeper and save this hive. Any more questions?
Yep, so it's the question we get asked often when you're using the smoker, what have you put in the smoker?
So I've just put some garden mulch in there. In fact, thanks for reminding me, a good time just to top up that smoker, and that way we can make sure it keeps going. It's a useful tool in beekeeping, both for calming the hive and moving bees away. So the way we top it up is we open the lid like that, and we put some more. In this case, I'm just using the organic sugarcane mulch. We've probably got some dry mulch under the hive here, and I can just put a bit more in like that, and that will just keep that smoker topped while we do our beekeeping. If it goes out, you've just got to start again by lighting and puffing the smoker again to get it going. Let's blow a bit more smoke in, seeing they do have a slightly more protective nature today. It's not overly aggressive, like they're not. Sometimes you can get a hive that really has some undesirable traits where as soon as you open it, they're flying out of the hive and crashing into your veil. That'd be a good queen to take away and introduce a new queen with known calm genetics. Any more questions?
Yep, see the Dio's had a bit of an issue with bees sort of falling out of the box and dying, and just wondering, I'm not sure where Dio is, what could possibly be going on there?
Falling out of the box and dying, so
Yeah.
we need a little bit more information. I mean, a hive will have thousands of bees actually dying every day, and some of those will be at the entrance, and that's just the normal turnover when you think you've got maybe 30,000 bees in the hive here. Queen's laying a lot of eggs every day to keep up that population, because the worker bees might only be living for 4 weeks. So there's quite a big turnover. So bees dead at the entrance is completely normal. However, sometimes it's not normal, where you see a big carpet of them dead with their tongues hanging out. That could be they sucked on flowers where insecticides were sprayed on them, or perhaps there's another reason. Perhaps they're overrun with varroa and starting to get so weak there's bees dying at the entrance. That's very late stage varroa, where you'll see it. If you pick one up, you'll actually see the varroa mites on them. So we'll need a little bit more information, but if you need a hand, keep those questions coming in, either to the customer support, where Trace will be helping answer those, or if you've got more information here in the thread, we can keep answering. Okay. Now, this is another dry frame. So, this hive failed in requeening itself. So we will intervene by opening up another hive and giving it a frame with some eggs down the cells or a queen cell on it. And that way we will reintroduce the ability for them to raise another queen and get themselves back on their feet. Now, that's a great reason to have more than one hive. It makes you self-sufficient in your beekeeping, because you can then prop up this hive from dying out by introducing those resources from another hive.
So how long can a hive last being queenless? Dan wants to know.
So So generally it's slowly winding down over a few months. Now, you say the worker bees only last 4 to 6 weeks, say, but you've also got, when the queen stops laying, you've also got a couple of weeks there. So 21 days is a cycle of the brood. So that brood will still keep emerging for another couple of weeks after the queen vanishes. Then you've got the life of those bees as well. So you've really got a couple of months, but the earlier you sort it, the better, because you can get to this point where the hive is what's called hopelessly queenless, where for whatever reason they get into a state where they won't accept the new queen. They've been queenless for so long, and at that stage, if they're failing to take a new queen, you're better off merging it with another hive, which is another reason to have more than one hive. You can then save the resources here by putting this brood box on top of another hive, and that way that you get to save all the comb and all the remaining bees. Use the newspaper technique by putting a couple of sheets of newspaper over the top of the hive you're moving it onto. Poke some holes in it for airflow, drop your brood box on top, and the bees will come up and keep those frames good, and you've saved that last population. So you've been taking the bees with it. And the flow frames, would be best to put them in the freezer if you can, or if they're dry, you can put them away in storage for when a hive is ready for them again. So a few options there. When your hive goes queenless, you can either save the hive by reintroducing resources, or you can merge the remaining brood box with another hive.
Great. Now, got a few people tuning in where to buy single flow frames and other little bits and pieces. Check honeyflow.com or contact customer support for things like single flow frames, things like that you can't find on the website, and customer support are always there to help you out. And also people asking, do we ship to their country? Go to the honeyflow.com website, and look, you'll notice at the moment it's coming up to our fabulous birthday, and there's a fantastic sale on at the Australian site at the moment, but it will be on all other sites, I think, by tomorrow. Have a look, great birthday bundles with the Flow Hive 2 Plus. Pretty exciting with seeds, the book, everything, it's all happening. It's all deluxe out there.
Fantastic, yeah. It's been quite a journey writing that book, and it's full of inspiration for looking after your bees and little gems of the amazing world of bees, because they are and they have been such a revered species, and they are such an important keystone in our whole agricultural food system as well. So the book is made to inspire and also be a useful book, and it also tells the story of how we arrived here with our flow hive, which people are really appreciating.
And also some really amazing photos of Cedar growing up with his family, with Stu. It is quite incredible actually to see the whole story of Cedar and Stu. Hey, see, Simon's got a question. He's in Hamilton, Victoria. He currently has 2 brood boxes and 1 super, but he really wants to reduce his hive back to 1 brood box and 1 super because he can't have additional hives where he is. What's the best way to reduce a hive back to 1 brood box and 1 super? Okay,
so if he's got 2 brood boxes,
yeah,
and how many supers?
He's got 1 super, but he can't
so
have
we want
more
to take
than
1 brood box away.
He wants to get rid of a brood box, yeah.
So this is the brood box down the bottom, and if you've got a double brood box, which some people find useful in those colder areas, then reducing it down, you'll need to take a lot of frames away. So if it's this size box, there'll be 10 frames that have to get removed. Now, that's a little bit tricky if there is brood in the frames, but if there is brood in all the frames, then you probably don't need to reduce it. But what you normally find is the second box might be mainly honey. So therefore, if there's only honey or honey and pollen in the frames, you can take those frames away and enjoy, keep them in the fridge or in sealed containers where you can then cut out that comb or give the comb away, and people will enjoy the honey-filled frames. And if it's just dry, you can use that wax for your crafting projects, or you can just cut it out and either burn it or bury it, and that way you've got you've dealt with the frames in the extra box. If you find, and you might like to do a reshuffle and put some frames of brood from the top brood box down to the bottom one, so you put all the brood downstairs, and there might be honey in the bottom box on the edges, so you move that upstairs. So you're trying to configure it so you're taking away only the honey and pollen. If there's still more brood and you've just still got another frame left over, a little trick is you can fit a frame under the roof here, prop it up on little sticks so it's not sitting flat against it, pull the plug out of the inner cover. Even though it's on its side, the nurse bees will come up and look after that brood as it finishes its cycle. Then once the brood's emerged, you can take that frame away as well. Now, don't take any brood away from the hive. You want that to stay in here so that the brood can emerge, and that way your hive will stay strong. And then you'll have a setup like this with a single brood box and a single super, which is nice and simple and easy to manage. You still need, in your colder area through the winter, you might still need to be careful, make sure there's enough resources for your bees to survive through to the following spring. Ask your local beekeepers, get more than one answer. Sometimes people will say you need a whole box of honey, some people will say you just need half a box of honey, and so on. But if you don't have enough resources, feeding them prior to that winter with a thick syrup, 2:1 ratio, 2 parts sugar, 1 part water, cooking that up, letting it cool and putting it in your chosen feeder will really help them store at least something to make sure they've got resources to survive through till the next spring. And cold climate beekeeping, you'll be thinking about that a lot leading into the winter. East Coast Australia beekeeping here, we don't have to worry about that because we have a year-round honey season. Okay, now this smoker needs a little bit more of a puff. We've been talking too long. So sometimes you really need to do some good puffing to get it going again. These bees are a bit grumpy today, so we're going to put this hive back together, and later we will introduce another frame. We won't do it now, but the process is go down to another hive, pull out a frame with some eggs in it and put it in here and give them another go at raising a queen.
And seeds on that, as you were saying, like if you've got a couple of hives, but for people who only have one hive, what do they have to buy a queen? What do they do?
So if you've only got one hive, really recommend taking a split when there's a lot of bees and starting a second hive, because that makes you then more sustainable. You can fix problems by moving the resources from one to another. But if you don't want to do that, then you need to lean on other beekeepers or buy a queen bee in the mail, which comes in a little cage, a mated queen, and that can be a great way to get nice, calm, productive genetics by introducing that queen into your hive, because breeders will be really breeding for their favourite traits, and that will be a great way to get those genetics in.
And now, so you're using your smoker, and we've got someone who often has total fire bans in their area and wondering how do you go about doing that? Is it possible you could maybe use a spray bottle with lemongrass oil or something to calm the bees if you're not allowed to use a smoker?
People do things like that, spray sugar water, so the bees that are flying and perhaps are the ones getting aggressive then have to land and lick themselves clean. So there is weird and wonderful things out there. Let us know how you go. Do a little bit of research too, because it may be the case in total fire ban you actually can use your smoker. It really depends on how tight the regulations are at that point. Now, we've had a lot of rain here, so we're not concerned here, but other parts of the country or the world do have a dry time where fire is a big concern, in which case you're always putting your smoker down on a garbage bin lid, a metal garbage bin lid, just to limit the chances of the embers catching on the ground, and have some things with you that could help put out a fire if it set fire to the leaves, something to whack the ground with, or some water or hose on hand would be a great idea in those areas. But don't quote me on it, but I think if you look into the regulations in your area, or perhaps call the fire brigade, they may say you can use a smoker in total fire ban. But there has been cases where they have banned the use of smokers in very fire-prone areas as well. So you just need to look into that.
So you've got a tip for someone's put their brood frames together and they've used the comb guides, but they've broken a couple of the comb guides on these brood frames. Got a tip for what they could use instead of the comb guides?
Okay, if you're short some comb guides for some frames, paddle pop sticks will do just fine. Poke a few in the top. Use a little nail or a little bit of glue to secure them in place and away you go. If they've already been using the frame, then don't worry about it. You don't really need a comb guide anymore because they've got a guide there with their wax at the top. Okay, we're going to start putting this hive back together again by sliding these frames back into the position. We're being careful not to squash the bees as these end bars come together. We can use a bit of smoke to smoke them out of the way as we close the gap between those end bars. There we go. Smoke's a great tool for getting bees out of the way. Even though it's probably not fun to have smoke blown in your face, it's better than being squashed. So go ahead and use your smoke. Okay, there we go. And you're trying to put it back in the same order, or if you can't, or you can't remember, just make sure you're not squashing two areas of comb against comb. If you've got a lot of hive beetles, that can be an area where they really get in and lay a lot of eggs because the bees can't get in because the comb is actually squashed together. So avoid doing that, and make sure if you're on the east coast of Australia here where we've got a lot of hive beetles and varroa, make sure you're catching those beetles. We're just out the other side, it feels like. We had a lot of hives in the area going down from weakened by varroa and then taken out by the beetles, but we've seen a reprieve in that now, which is good, and perhaps, fingers crossed, we are now joining the world in just general management, but if you're just to the north of us, you're probably in the thick of it now with the most intense varroa and beetle action. So make sure you're getting out there, looking after your hives, activating your pest management tray, catching the beetles, catch the beetles in whatever way you can, and then using your chosen method for reducing the varroa mites as well. Okay, putting these frames back in, and there we go, last one. Now another thing is when you put the hive back together, you want to make sure any excess space is on the edges. Now, you might see it, if you're a conventional beekeeper and start using our boxes, you might say, well, there's a lot of space on the edges, but after a while, as you can see here, that space closes up and you'll really appreciate the extra room you have, because often, and I used to do this, conventional beekeeping, I would put 9 frames in a 10 frame box simply because they were too tight. So when we came to designing the specs of our hives, we added a little extra space on the edges to fix that conventional beekeeping issue. But always give them a good squash together, and that just helps the spacing of the frames, and you're less likely to get bees building wonky comb between them because they are very sensitive to the spacing between the frames.
So if you've taken a full frame of honey out for winter, how long can you leave it, and you've put it in the freezer, how long can you store it in the freezer for?
You can store it in the freezer for as long as you like. It's a great way to store either flow frames or frames of honey. Some beekeepers will prefer to store a few frames in the freezer for the hive when they might be hungry rather than feeding them sugar syrup. And it will last almost indefinitely in the freezer. So if you've got the freezer space, it's a great way to store some excess honey frames. Okay, now the queen excluder should go back on. This is a bit low on population, this hive, so it's pretty easy to put that queen excluder on without bothering the bees. And then we'll show you how to pack up your hive with the super lifter again. So you get your queen excluder nicely in position. And then it's a case of landing the hive right at the back here, like that, in line. And all we need to do is then use the super lifter mechanics to gently lower it down onto to the box. Now this is something that people rave about. It's really different than waddling up with a really heavy hive covered in bees and just dropping it on like we had to do conventionally. There's really no other way to do it. And now my father and I spent a long time developing this, so you can gently and easily close that hive up. You can spend as long as you want just brushing those bees out of the way and using your smoker and bee brush, and you just get this beautiful controlled landing, and that's something we've got a lot of great feedback on as well. Let us know what you think of our super lifter, and as Trace said, there's good inspiration there. If you have been thinking about beekeeping for a while, we do have some specials. If you're in other countries, it should be coming online tomorrow, but on our shop there's also some great bundles there for you as well. We're going to go back and have a look at our honey harvest, which is has been harvesting itself while we have been doing some useful beekeeping things. So let's go and see. Sometimes we overflow our honey jars. I'm going to take my veil off. Okay, wow. I think we're close to overflowing there. Let's have a look at that. Beautiful. Perfection. Isn't that just amazing? So let's have a look at the next one. Beautiful. 2 nice jars of honey, 2 different colours. It's such an amazing thing to be able to isolate those flavours and enjoy the differences rather than mixing them all together, not only from one hive but from 30 hives. I'd mix all of the honey together in the extraction room in conventional ways, and it was great. The honey was great, but not as amazing as being able to taste and share all the different flavours. Yeah, really different. Bright and floral versus a more typical honey type flavour actually here. And that's just simply because the bees were foraging on different flowers when they filled this frame to when they filled this one. We've got these jumping ants here which give a nasty sting, more nasty than a bee sting actually, in my opinion. And when aggravated they jump all over the place and right onto your foot when you're walking across their nest. And they're a good one to be aware of. So I've got to pick up these little caps without getting a sting from a jumping ant. Now, a little tip, when you're finished harvesting, you're back to a 90, sliding into the top slot here and turn this. It'll be easier to turn than when you're opening it, just like that. And leave it there for a minute or 2 because that makes sure all the parts are down into cell-formed position, which is important. If they're left a little bit up, what you may find is there's wobbly shaped honeycomb cells with a lot of wax build up, and that might make a problem for the honey flow path next time. So good little tip there as you pack up that frame. Okay, now I've got to get these little caps without getting the jumping out. There's huge jumping. Okay. This little tube comes out, cap goes in, and the idea is, once you get the hang of it, you're doing this with a very minimal mess or fuss or effort. The honey has just filled up your jar, and look at that. That is beautiful. So we're now going to move that key to the other frame. You can almost feel when the parts are reset. If it's really firm to turn the key still, then parts are still slowly compressing the wax and propolis in the frame. And here we go, into the top slot. Leave it there for a minute or 2, and away we go. And then this is the lighter honey flavour. You can either enjoy those swirls or leave it there on the edge of the jar for the remaining honey. It's so full though, I don't think it'll fit. So I'm going to have to enjoy that honey.
Seeds, would you ever recommend having 2 supers on a flow hive?
For sure, and we do it sometimes, but generally we just keep it in this simple fashion. But if you're in a part of the world that gets really amazing honey flows all compressed into one part of the season, you see, if you're up in Canada, for instance, then what you can get is all the flowers flowering in a few months of the year. And what that means for the bees is they build up to an extraordinary large numbers in the hive, and they boast in Canada that they can fill a whole box in a single day. Now that's hard for us to believe, we don't see that here. A few weeks is probably the quickest we see it, or maybe a week. But in those areas of extreme honey flows, then it may be worth having more supers, and people in Canada have stacked them 5 supers high, which is extreme. You could probably just harvest in different, change the mentality of how you're harvesting, where you have 1 or 2 honey supers and just keep storing honey in boxes on the hive. Keep storing honey in jars on the shelf instead of stacking big boxes and harvesting in a batch processing way like you do conventionally. So one place what would be a number of conventional honey supers, something that doesn't necessarily That's quite cool. Normally I don't know if you can see that jumping ant. Let's go into the light. You've got a jumping ant eating honey. Now they're very aggressive and painful. You can see how they're red and black. And there it is, sucking away. Look at that. Learn something new every day. Beautiful. Look at that jar of honey. Now, what do we do with you, ant? I want to close the lid. Thanks very much for all of your great questions, and also for all of you that are chiming in and helping answer all of the questions in the thread. It's such an amazing thing to have a global community helping each other in beekeeping. I've learnt so much, and if you do want a beekeeping course to take you from square one right through to a deep knowledge in beekeeping, have a look at thebeekeeper.org. It's a course we put together with experts from all over the world. It's free to try, and also an amazing fundraiser for the bees, and also it gets rave reviews from people who jump in and learn from that online beekeeping course at thebeekeeper.org. Thank you very much for all your questions. See you again, same time next week, and we'll have an interesting, I believe it's beginner beekeeping next week, so we will be getting someone who's never done beekeeping before to give you a show and tell of doing their first bit of beekeeping. See you then. Thanks for watching.